of the owners of Belmont, there's probably about 13 or so recorded owners of Belmont. One of the owners, John M. Wilson, against the law, wrote in his will that there is a half acres of land reserved for a slave cemetery. Adjacent to that land is a schoolhouse where slaves were educated. That is the law first mentioned. That is the first time that the Belmont Slave Cemetery was ever mentioned in text. That is also what gave me the gravitas to actually go and ask for or demand, some other may call it, this land to be returned to the descendants. It's recorded. It is, it was, and it will forever be our land, our history.
These were people, the people buried there actually had lived in West Africa, West Central Africa, the Caribbean, and that we should use take a diasporic framework by which to understand the artifacts and the experiences in the bones in the cemetery. So I hired people who were specialists in all those areas. And it's made an extraordinary difference because just minimally, if you only understand them, and even in terms of Manhattan, you understand them as enslaved people. But they were brought there, they came with diverse cultural and biological, sort of health differences associated with the places where they had lived as human beings for part of their lives. So it becomes a human story about human beings who spent part of their lives in New York, some of them all of their lives in New York, short lives generally, if that were the case, and who were buried there. It allowed us to look at artifacts and see, the famous one is the heart-shaped symbol that may be Sankofa, a Ghanaian Adinkra symbol that means when you lose something, go back and fetch it. Go look to the past as to inform the present and as a guide to the future. It has to do with many relationships between past, present, and future, elders and young.
Truly, today is a day the Lord ordained. I want to thank and congratulate every single person who made this moment possible. To my friend, my sister, and at times, a sparring partner, Pastor Michelle Thomas, who taught us all that a determined woman with a holy mission is not to be stopped. Because of your vision, grit, and determination, our ancestors are finally in the hands of people who love them and see them as individual humans, deserving of respect and dignity. I'm simply heartbroken that I can't join you today. However, please know that I stand with you at every moment. God bless and keep you all. And now, we go forward.
If it has to do with, DNA has become a very popular thing, partly as a result of this project, but that's a very complex story. But I can tell you, therefore, that, whether it's 23andMe or Ancestry.com, a lot of this is marketing and hype. They have not demonstrated the reliability of these tests, but the public does not seem to care. And yet the public uses this information in ways that I make a book about on socializing DNA that's about how that information becomes politically and socially important, whether it's scientific or not, right? So all that's a reality. We would use the DNA data, but perhaps more importantly, Dr. Jones's chemical data, to tell you something, as he says, was the person born in Africa, West Africa, maybe West Central Africa, or not? Then there are the artifactual data. If there are artifacts, they can point to specific places, but often it's about interpretation. In any case, documentation is great. The more time we spend here, the more rich the documentation that Loudoun County has appears to be.
Cotton Plantation ruins still exist. They're right behind the clubhouse, and you can see them. There are only a few only a few sites that remain. One of the sites is the foundation of the Manor House. That Manor House foundation still exists. They did do an archaeological survey there, and so we have recovered some of the artifacts from that dig. There's also two buildings that are immaculately preserved by the HOA. I know you said that you were with Belmont HOA at one time. So the HOA preserved the two slave sites, so two sites from the enslaved. And so one of the sites is the wash house, where some of the enslaved lived at the top, and then the bottom was used primarily for washing. The other site that was preserved was the smokehouse, and that's immaculately preserved. I have not personally been in either site. They're wholly owned by the HOA. But what is most hard and difficult is the fact that these sites remain hidden in plain sight. In other words, we've all been to the pool at Lansdowne, and we've all seen these houses. We just don't know where they are. We don't know where they were. We don't know how they were used because there's no language. There's no historic markers there to guide us along that story. So that is one of the Loud of Freedom's next effort, is to get historic markers listed throughout this site. Imagine, the enslaved lived and worked here for years. Over 65 years we lived and worked here, and there's nothing recorded about our contributions here. So we must change that. Historic preservation equality must come to Loudons.
As we can possibly find out for our young people. We have an obligation to restore history. And I want students to know who was buried there. I want our students to know how they lived, what they endured, how they died, why they're buried where they are. I want them to know as much as we can possibly find out, if possible, because I think it's important for our young people to understand their local history and to be able to restore the missing holes in history.
This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad. What a beautiful day in our community to bring everyone together at this holy site. You know, if these grounds could speak, if the people here could speak, this is the mission now, to tell the stories. And I thank you, Pastor Michelle, and everybody involved in this, in giving voices to the voiceless. So many of these voices were silenced in their lifetime. They weren't known about, but now our duty is now to bring all of this to light. We need to know their stories, their names, and understand how they lived and how they died, because all of this is important to know in our community. And I want to thank people all over the community that work on this really year-round. Earlier this year, the Loudoun County's Clerk Historic Records Division had an open house hosted by our clerk, Gary Clemens. I know, Pastor Michelle, you were there too. And the exhibit, which displayed the historic documents related to the history of the enslaved in our community, was very powerful. Fairfax County also came over and worked with us. If your children haven't been there, and first of all, God bless you for having so many children here today, and thank you all for being here and being part of this. But I hope you also go see those records if they're on display next February in African History Month, or just probably ask Gary Clemens and he'll let you know. But it is powerful to see how the enslaved population was taxed, and to see those documents and what that actually meant in our very own community here.
I see the horse come stepping on countless blooded brow. Coming, my dear friend, see that his neck strained with thunder, and the lightning was playing on the bridle rein, so death had in his hand. He come riding, and the dying thief looked death in the face, caught sight on the opposite side of the horse.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Randy Minshew, and I am not the first elected Republican ever to speak on a cold November day at a cemetery. There was another, a man far greater than me, who spoke at a cemetery in a little town north of here in Pennsylvania called Gettysburg. And on that cold November day, President Lincoln said a few words. He looked out over the cemetery and said, "We cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground." Continuing, he said, the men lying in that cemetery had already hallowed it, far above our poor power to add or detract. Ladies and gentlemen, the men and women and children lying here in this cemetery, in this land, have already hallowed and have already consecrated this land. They lived and died in this country. The land, in the words of President Jefferson, was one born of liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise, high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Let us march on till victory is won.